you learn everything about a person or people when times are hard, right? Not when they're
Yeah.
easy. And I think that's when all the, the temperament, the characteristics, the resilience, fortitude kind of comes up.
So join me and Baljeet Sangha, System COO and Strategy Officer for San Francisco Health Network. So welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with my very special guest, who thank you, Eric Johnson, for introducing me. It's Baljeet Sangha, right? Baljeet, am I saying that right?
Yep.
Thank you. Chief Operating Officer and Chief Strategy Officer, which I love the combo. You and I chatted about it before I hit record, is that it's a really cool dual role, because strategy about looking out what's best for the organization, and then ops to say, okay, what does the implementation of that stuff look like, and what are the constraints that we have? So I love it for San Francisco Health Network. So, well, Gene, I know you have a quote to kick us off, and so welcome to the conversation, sir.
Thanks for having me, Michelle, and major appreciation to Eric Johnson for recommending me to link up and to do this.
Yeah, Eric, I enjoy Eric's leadership and perspective, and it was so funny because I asked people in the podcast, who would you recommend? Who do I need to talk to? And Eric goes, I know exactly who you need to talk to. And I'll connect you. So I know you have a quote to kick us off, just around, because we're going to talk about your leadership journey, some highlights from it, but there's one that resonates with you, and I love the quote about something about you have enemies, question mark.
Yeah, actually, I was a history major as an undergrad, and so my bachelor's degree is in history. And one of the things I really loved about that kind of immersion and that level of learning at that point in my life was just hearing about all these cool quotes from all these cool leaders. And you could read a whole textbook and all this assigned reading, and nothing sinks in, but you get one pithy quote that just all of a sudden resonates and kind of embeds itself in your mind and psyche for the rest of your life. And so one of those was actually from Winston Churchill,
Yeah.
wartime prime minister for England during World War II. And Winston Churchill said something along the lines of, you have enemies, good. That means you stood up for something sometime, at least once in your life. And I think kind of a paraphrase. And over the years, sometimes that's been attributed to different people. But, when I first became introduced to it, it was via the avenue of Winston Churchill. And that quote really just resonated with me because, a lot of times when you're growing up, and, I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana, and moved to California when I was about 10. And, looking very different, identify as a North Indian,
Yeah.
going to be, Sikh man. And, you're always a little afraid at times, just like trying to,
Yeah.
how do you fit in? I had four
Mhm.
different schools in 4 years. And so it's like, how do you make friends? How do you fit in? You look different. I had a Southern accent, so you sound different.
Yeah.
And part of that was like, when you get to a point of when you start to establish your identity and wanting to, make sure you speak up and advocate for yourself, for your others, for family, friends, whatever it may be. And 'cause that quote really stuck out. It's like, you know what, you're right. It's like it's if people are unhappy with something you said, something you've done, chances are you picked picked a position on something and you
Hmm.
stuck with it. And history can say it was the right position, it was the wrong position, you shouldn't have done that. But the point is the having the fortitude to just be able to pick something and say, you know what, this is important to me, and I'm going to stick through it. And I took it as the opposite of being stubborn. I think as
Yeah.
leaders, we want to evolve in our thinking. We want to
Hmm.
be open-minded, and we want to make sure that we hear things. But you also want to be resolute and say, this is a direction. I feel good about it. I am
Hmm.
confident with what I have, the data, the perspective, and sometimes not everyone's gonna be happy with the direction, but your heart of hearts, if you're like, this is what's best for the organization, it's best for me, it's best for my community, it's best for your family, and so it help me get over many times over the hump in my life of bummer. Not everyone is universally all in 100% of the time, the entire majority or consensus. And I asked, what, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Have enough to know and then I think that was really one of the main quotes that really helped me pretty regularly. I'm probably on a day-to-day, even week-to-week basis.
It's interesting. I appreciate you saying that, because as always, anybody who's listened to me, there's 50 zillion things in my head right now. A couple of them, the key points I think is around leadership is as leaders, there was one person I interviewed that she talked about when she was a new leader, that she wanted to make everyone happy. And so she'd talk to this group of people and she'd make this decision. And then she'd talk to somebody else and then the decision changed because this other group, and then somebody else and the decision changed again. So to your point, as leaders, we need to make well-informed decisions, but we also need to stick by them when we've made them, because otherwise, when we vacillate like that, people don't know how to follow us.
Yeah.
They
I've
don't know what's next.
100%. I've been there and I've had that same learning and I've had that same, I would consider that, a learning moment. Others might say, oh, shoot, that was a kind of a failure in some of the elements. But it's true because the imposter syndrome is real wherever you
Mm-hmm,
are, like wherever level of an executive you may be. There's going to be something. You have a new opportunity, whether you're going from a COO to a CEO or CEO to another CEO job, or you're just a fresh, newly minted, grad going into a first entry level job as an early
mm-hmm,
careerist. And you want to make people happy. You're like, if the imposter syndrome of like, gosh, I don't know if I earned this, but people are happy with me, then at least they're happy. And what you realize is that if you start to vacillate and change from what you share with one group, and then group B help it said, hey, I wanted this, and that negated what you said to group A,
mm-hmm,
then along the line you start to lose the confidence of these individuals. Like, oh, that person
mm-hmm,
is just actually either lying on one end or just
mm-hmm,
like they're not sure what they're talking about. And I think that's why it's important to just it's important to say, hey, here's my facts, and here's what I'm using, and here's the why now.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is, it might not be an explanation that you're happy with, or a route or a pathway that you're pleased with, but
Mm-hmm,
at least people understand. And so I
mm-hmm.
think that really is important. So that leader, that story you told, I 100% resonate with that. It happened to me
Mm-hmm.
multiple times in my life. And then you realize at the end of the day, like, shoot, not I was trying to get, 8 different groups to support me, and now all 8 don't. If I
Yeah.
if I if I at least stuck with the path, at least one of the 8 would have been happy, right? And so, so I
I
think,
wouldn't have pissed
yeah.
everybody off. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, but it's one of those things that you, when you've gone through it and you've learned it once or twice, then you're like, you know what, it's more valuable, and people will respect you. Like, hey, at least, we didn't agree with the path, but here were the reasons, and here's where we
Yeah.
how we moved ahead.
Yeah, I have to laugh because I remember her saying she was fortunate enough to have someone, because she was a school principal within the system, come to her as she was retiring and say, now the leader wasn't retiring, this other person was, and go, you're not here to make people like you. You can not everyone's going to like and support the decisions, to your point and to the quote that you shared. So you've got to pick a place. So, Baljeet, I have to wonder in your journey, because you shared stuff that you're with where you are now, and then you left the organization for a minute and had some valuable lessons and then came back. Where did you learn that lesson along the way? Because that's a very poignant lesson around, what's associated with a quote, to take that stand, because you have people not happy with you, but you lose credibility.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that the way I kind of have come to terms with that, or in the way I've said, you know what, this is the path and this is the type of leader I want to be, is one day you look up and you look around and you're like, oh man, like people are looking to me to advocate for them. People
Mm-hmm,
are looking to me to be, to be the tip of their spear, and people are looking to me
mm-hmm.
to like, they think I know what's going on, and you're like, oh shoot, like, oh, well, who's gonna break it to them? Like, I don't. So,
On
but
it together. I am the one that has that badge.
yeah, yeah, it's like so, but but there's a lot of responsibility, right? A lot of power comes with that. And I think that's where
Yeah.
you step back and say, folks they may not want the right answer every time. I mean, they would love it, but that's not what they're expecting. They're expecting someone that they can get behind and say, you know what, we believe in this person, their integrity, their direction, their vision, their authenticity, them being a genuine, human.
Yeah.
and that's what they want. And you know, and you have to be that person. If that's an act for you, and like it's hard to be
Hmm.
that person, then that probably is a major sign of a larger kind of larger issues and larger reflections that need to happen. But you know, so for me, I'm like, I look around and, you know, like, and you think about what's the kind of leader that I wanted when I was starting off, or
Yeah.
what's the kind of leader that I want today? And it's like, am I even the leader that I want, right? For my,
Hmm.
for myself. And you step back and like, well, you know, these folks, this community needs me to advocate. So if it
Hmm.
means I have to be in a meeting with one person, three people, 10 people, and I have to take a stance or, you know, be an advocate and say, well, no, that's not acceptable. Like
Hmm.
it's not acceptable that for the last three meetings you said you'd get back to us about, you know, the permitting for this local park that is adjacent to our healthcare facility that our community members want to go to while their loved one's in surgery. Like that will mean a lot for them for peace of mind while they're going through a very traumatic, if not one of the most traumatic experiences of their lives.
Hmm.
And you're like, and they're like, oh, we'll get back to you. Like, no, that's not acceptable. And
Hmm.
I don't like it. I don't buy it. And I, you know, I require and demand an answer. And that's hard because we're all
Hmm.
kind of we're preconditioned, I think, a pre-programmed just to be conflict averse. You want to have friendly interactions. It's easier
Hmm.
to smile. It's easier to laugh. And you know, when you're in that point, you're like, well, you know what? There's a lot of families, there's a lot of patients, there's a lot of folks in my community that are advocating on for me in this
Hmm.
meeting to represent them. And
Yeah.
you kind of channel that and say, well, that's what I got to do.
Hmm.
Because I'm not there to make friends with, you know, those people in that meeting or in those rooms. I'm there
Yeah.
to make sure I represent and advocate for my organization and the people that we're serving. And I think that's once you get to that point and that's where you can say, you know, this is where I land, then everything else
Hmm.
is it has been much easier for me. Like,
Yeah.
and you can also do that by still being polite. You could be yourself. You don't have to be a
Yes.
jerk. You know, you could
No.
deliver that. You could deliver that message and say like, "Hey, wow, this has been a great conversation and a great meeting. Appreciate what you're doing. Unfortunately, this is actually unacceptable. We, you know, we
Yeah.
respect the bureaucracy. But it's been 3 months, or you know, whatever the example may be. I think that's where you step in and just say, okay, now I gotta earn that title and you know earn that respect that people have given me, and I can't just you know I gotta follow through."
I love because I love what you're saying and the whole gist of what you're saying, because what came to mind for me is if you can ground your leadership in purpose, right? If you can ground your leadership in that this is my role, this is the part I'm playing, to your point, you don't have to come in and be a jerk. You don't have to do all that stuff, but you have to be able to stay true to what your role is and what your purpose is and your role in that, whatever scenario is playing out. And to your point, it's not easy. There are times it would be great to go, yeah, and tell people, go, I tried. Okay, that doesn't work anymore because we have to be able to step in and we have to do and follow through and be able to accomplish things because that's what people are counting us to do. They're not, to your point, they're not in the room. And that was one of the things when I talked to leaders about, like when leadership, senior leadership, C-suite level, you have a seat at the table, Baljeet, that other leaders don't have, other people in the organization don't have. And to your point, you're representing that. So it's important as leaders to be able to gather up all the information that we have about what's really happening in our part of the org that we have oversight to, as we go in to have a seat at that table in that room, because we're representing everything and there are decisions being made, especially with the two roles that you have. So do I have all the information to be able to make the best decision for the part of the organization that I'm representing? And so there's a lot there, and it can be like, oh my God, how do I find out? So it sounds like to me, part of what you're doing too is you're putting yourself in a position to actually understand what people need. So how do you do that? How do you carve that into your schedule? Because you've got two very distinct roles. I mean, I could easily say, well, gee, you got two full-time jobs here. So
Yeah.
how do you carve out time for that? Because it sounds like you do.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the things, you know, just tying back to what you were just sharing and plus the question, I mean, you know, you learn everything about a person or people when times are hard, right? Not when they're
Yeah.
easy. And I think that's when all the, you know, the temperament, the characteristics, the resilience, fortitude kind of comes up. And I think so when that comes into like, this the roles that we've all chosen, and we're in the healthcare industry, but I think every industry has challenges, difficulty. If
Yeah.
some of these industries were to go away, our functioning society would stop, right? If the housing
Mm-hmm.
industry went away, if the aviation industry went away, if whatever it might be. And so I think, when you want to step back and you're like, well, I'm supposed to be an advocate for folks. What are they saying? What do they want? Sometimes folks will be very vocal. And,
Mm-hmm.
the new leader, they're like, hey, let me get 5 minutes of your time. And I want to just tell you this, that, and the other thing. And those are all data points, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
great, it's important for new leaders, and I think everyone's a leader. If you're first day analyst, you can be a leader,
Yeah.
right? You can
Yeah.
champion and drive, I love it when analysts come out of grad school and they're like, hey, I can do this whole thing you've been spending 10 hours manually crunching and typing. Hey, let me throw in a little formula in this Excel spreadsheet, and now boom, we're done in 30 minutes. And
You're
so
like, I love you. You're my new best friend.
yeah, I mean, everyone can lead and teach. Everyone has something to teach and share,
Yes.
and not just technical skills, but
Mm-hmm.
everyone's the whole cultural humility lens, and like everyone's come from a different background and bring a lot of just life experience. And so,
Mm-hmm.
people will share that with you. So that's one way to hear and listen. Like, how do you be an advocate? Others are then, you want to always be a student, right? Constantly learning, constantly
Mm.
not just what your own organization is doing, but and what your own organization has done, but what's the history and trajectory of other organizations? Like, how have other
Mm.
organizations addressed this? How are they tackling this? Do they have the same problems? Just that'd be
Mm-hmm.
incredibly validating that, we're not the only ones struggling. And I think when you can do that and you're learning from other peers, it's important to network. It's important to like establish just some chains of communication because you can bounce ideas off of each other.
Yeah.
Or you can just at least commiserate, right? And there's a
Mm-hmm.
difference between venting, but there's also like commiserating and saying, yeah, we got these challenges, but now we gotta buck up and let's see what we can do and kind of lean into it a little bit. And I think that also helps learn because people can tell you what they want, but sometimes folks aren't exactly sure what they want. They know
Mm-hmm.
that what's happening right now is not what they want,
Yeah.
right? And so that's like, this is not good. I don't know what the answer is or what the specific pathway is, but right now is not it. And I
Yeah.
think that's when, okay, and even then that's helpful. So you just figure out
Yeah.
what's palpable or more palatable for others. And it can be palpably like there where you're like, wow, I can feel it. This is tense. Or like, hey, folks are much more, they know that this is not the be all end all. We're not what we
Yeah.
were, but we're
Yeah.
not, and we're not quite what we're going to be, but we're also not what we were. And so you're
Yeah.
evolving and moving forward, and you look back and a month later you're better than you were last month, and 11 months will be better than you were like in a year. And so I think so that for me is kind of how I just work on it. Also, I think I would just have a nervous breakdown if I was just like, I got to get everyone's input about everything now, and then I will create a plan. It's like you're always evolving, right? But I think
Yeah.
the idea is to always kind of what we kicked off with the quote is always be open-minded and hear folks out because
Yeah.
a person's opinion will always be theirs, and
Mm-hmm.
the way a person feels will always be 100% right because that's their feeling, right?
Yeah.
I can't tell you you're not hungry, you're not upset, you're not frustrated, you're not anxious, you're not happy. They are. That's their feeling. And so if someone says, hey, I got a bone to pick with you, I think it's just got to practice that, like, okay, sure, hey, we'll let me have it. What's on your mind? I think that part of developing that resilience and just kind of tough skin to be able to hear feedback that sometimes is not
Mm-hmm.
always polished.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, that's also our roles. Our role is to hear everyone's perspective because we can't just
Mm-hmm.
advocate for the people that agree with us. We got to advocate for everyone.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where the real learning happens, right? So if we're just because otherwise you get in this group think kind of,
Yeah.
thing that, oh, everything's wonderful, really, for you and the people that think like you. But you've got this whole population, to your point, that they don't agree with you at all. I love the idea of giving people a venue. The thing that came to mind for me when you were talking is as leaders and just humans, and I totally agree with you as bobbleheading when you were going, even the analyst right out as the lead. Yes, we lead ourselves first, right? And then maybe we evolve to, or at some point become people leaders, right? So we're leading ourselves to lead other people. But it's the whole idea that's super important that we don't take whatever's being said to us personally.
Yeah.
Because then we start getting emotionally charged, charged, we've got different feelings that are involved and we're not thinking critically. So in that leadership role, I totally agree with you. It's like this is their feedback, their perspective, their feelings. And it's not a personal attack, but literally who else are they going to talk to?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and then that's I think part of being approachable. And I think this, the when you think about, hey, well, how do I do that? What's the next tangible step? Because I love tangible specific things. Like
Yeah.
give me something to do. Like I love
Yeah.
theory, that's great, but I need to take what I'm hearing now and I need to do something with it. And part of it's like just, build the way we try to build in time for a conference call or a meeting or a lunch or something, build in like 45 minutes, 40 minutes just to go for a walk, if it's in
Mm,
the organization, walk around, be visible. And that's the gateway into, all right, now maybe I'll do an hour to go around on a department and meet with
yeah.
department leaders, right? It's
Yeah.
like that's even the second step. And then the third step might be, okay, now I have standing time every week or every month to go around and I'm going to meet with these leaders at their staff huddles and do X, Y, or Z and share some pieces. And before you know it, it's part of your routine. And then
Mm,
people see you. They're approachable. Your direct reports, their direct reports, leaders, frontline staff see you. And so when you're coming around, it's not like, uh-oh, here's some bad news, or uh-oh,
yeah.
we did something wrong. And so it's just like, they you start to realize, hey, maybe you guys all have like a same sports team in common, the same cuisine in
Yeah.
common. Maybe everyone's talking about a show or two, and it humanizes you. It's not just this ivory tower of of leaders. I mean, that
Yeah.
pristine, perfect, polished perception of leadership is very Byzantine. Like that's,
Yeah.
leaders have chinks in the armor. Leaders have some battle scars, and leaders can say, hey, I'm sorry, I got that wrong, or we didn't, we learned from that and now we're
Hmm.
failing forward. I think that's important. But I
Yeah.
could never say I'm sorry or oh shoot, I failed like first 6 months out of grad school in my career. I'd be terrified.
It's so funny how we have this fear of failure or fear of admitting failure because failure is this like finality to it. And failure is it's just part of the learning journey. I mean, you have to expect that we're going to go through it. If not everything out of the gate's going to work, thank goodness. Because if it did, maybe it wasn't the best thing and then we wouldn't evolve from there. I have to laugh when you're talking about all that stuff because it is about what you were describing, and my brain went to from lean process improvement, leader standard work. You go to Gemba, you go out where the work's actually happening, and understand what's actually happening out there. And it is scary for leaders to go into parts of the organization that they've never been in. Maybe I was never a frontline worker in that part of the organization. What am I going to do there? What am I going to say? I don't know that part of the organization, and I'm the senior leader. Maybe they're going to think I'm a fake or a fraud or a phony, whatever it is. But it's what you just described as the evolution of you first going around and making intentional time for it, that all of a sudden it's like just part of your routine. People expect to see you now, right? They look forward to seeing you. They know if there's on a gotcha at the end of, Baljeet, rounding and, oh my gosh, what did we do wrong? And I bet at some level, they look forward to you showing up. So I just think it's awesome stuff. I want to thank you for your time. This has really been cool. So thank you so much. I know there's tons more that you could share with us. So if I can put a plant a seed for you, I would love to have you back at some point and hear more about your journey because I know there's been bumps along the way that have been super learning moments for you, and I would love to unpack that and share with people as well. It's important to hear for other people to hear as well. So I'm going to ask you, Baljeet, again, thank you for your time. What are one or two things that you would love people to walk away with around this topic that we started off with the Winston Churchill quote?
I would, yeah. Well, thanks for having me. It's been
Yeah,
this time's flown by pretty quickly. Looking forward to the next time, next conversation. I would say, that again, the fortitude and resilience. I think just figuring out your own, and it's folks have said this. I'm not any person new saying it, but your own why. Like, why do you do what you do? Why do you,
Yeah.
and are you doing it for yourself? No problem. Are you doing it for, you want to set a good set example for maybe children or a
Hmm.
family, loved ones, community members. Maybe there was an event that happened in one's life, and you're like, you know what, that changed my trajectory to do what I do, and that's what drives me. I think channeling whatever that why might be. And and again, and for some people it may be like all that plus, I'm doing why because I like what I do and I like the money I make and I like where I'm, whatever it may
Yeah.
be. There's no
Yeah.
judgment on what it is, what your why may be. But then saying, channeling that, like, this is why I do what I do, and I need to actually channel my why. It's still valid, and I'm going to move forward with that as my callus. It will galvanize me and give me that support or that backstop to to push forward, to lean in.
Yeah.
When it gets
Yeah.
uncomfortable, you're like, you know what? It is uncomfortable, but I got to do this because it's important to, again, insert your why here. And I think
Yeah.
that's really important. I mean, the fortitude or the work that everyone does is hard work. This is
Yeah.
hard work, and it can be soul crushing sometimes and
Mhm.
draining. You look at, healthcare, some of our meetings are all about fixing things. And you think about, wow, our rates of, medical errors or some inequities and disparities in terms of folks of different ethnicities and backgrounds are getting a different level of outcome or care than others. And you're
Yeah.
just like, that's it's disheartening. It could be soul crushing, but you gotta
Yeah.
be like, you know what? That's why we're here. If things
Hmm.
were easy, everyone would do it. If things were great and easy to be done, it would have been done a long time ago. But how
Hmm.
lucky are we to be the ones to now be able to solve this problem? So I think
Yeah.
that's probably that theme is one main thing. I think the second thing I would say is, and this is for folks who, again, I endorse being always a student of the craft, student of
Hmm.
history, student of other leaders. You know, you all you often listen to life and career path stories, and I think I would encourage folks to always remember that life and career path stories actually are not how life happens.
Oh yeah.
Career path stories are just it's not a clean movie.
No.
Instead, it's the one with all the bloopers. You gotta like, people shoot movies and they're like, oh, it took us 6 months to shoot that film. And you go to the movie theater and it's 90 minutes. You
Yeah.
didn't sit there for 6 months in the movie theater, right?
Yeah.
These stories end up becoming very polished. You cut things out, cut things down. You're not watching all the bloopers, all the errors, all the mistakes, all the missed line reads, all the
Mhm.
the polished actor, like, oh, that guy or that, actress or actor did an amazing job with 10 minutes of speech. And you're like, man, it took them like 4 months to do that in one cut. That's life, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
takes effort to, you want to remember about the bruises and blemishes, because when you're watching a story, you're just like, oh man, like I wish I could do that, or I wish that was me, or I wish, my career path or my stuff had lined up just like that. And the reality is that's not how it happens.
Mm-mm.
There's so many jobs I didn't get. There's so many projects that I submitted that were sent back because they were wrong. There were so many things
Hmm.
that were I've been embarrassed about. And I think when you hear that, you're like, hey, leaders, they're just like us too, and
Hmm.
like, they're just like regular people too. And so
Yeah.
I think that's really helpful because it starts to validate, and we're all on our own journey and trajectory, but our cycle and evolution as leaders and how we grow is somewhat similar. And so just
Hmm.
remembering that there are missteps there, and that the missteps are what make the stories great. The missteps are
Hmm.
what we can embrace it, but we only got 3 minutes to share a career path. You can't not 3 hours where you can share all
Yeah.
all the things that didn't go right. So that's probably the main things I would share, just to wake as
Yeah.
walk away. Like just sometimes you hear about people's struggles and it's kind of validating, not because you're happy they struggle, but because you're like, I'm
Mm-mm.
struggling and it's not just me now.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, and thank you for that, is that I think about you mentioned imposter syndrome and stepping into it. And part of it that can feed that, if we don't check that narrative, is this underlying story that they did it so much better. It was so much simpler for them. Look at all the mistakes and the missteps and everything else they had. And it's like, to your point, you don't know the rest of the story. You don't know the rest of what really happened. Because people don't lead with that. They don't lead with, oh my gosh, there was 10 jobs I didn't even get. I was applying for all this stuff. People just hear, oh my God, he was chosen. Or an overnight sensation, right? You hear singers and actors. No, it took them 15 years to get to this
Yeah.
point. No one's overnight sensation. But I think it's important for leaders. I think the thing that I would add to what you're talking about is lead with authenticity, which is one of the key messages you're having, right? Be you. Don't be this version of the you that you think they're supposed to be or because it's similar to somebody else. But the other part of it is have the courage to share the bumps and the bruises with other people so that they realize the path to the level of leadership that you're in currently is actually an achievable one for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you. I mean, you're just a cool guy, and I appreciate hanging out with you.
I appreciate
Well,
that. Likewise. Thank you.
yeah. Welcome back. And it'd be fun to do, Baljeet. It's get you and Eric in the room together. What do you think?
Oh, that'd be fun. I
Yeah.
virtually real. Anytime I can hang
Yeah.
out with Eric
Yeah.
is a privilege for me. So that's
Okay. So
you
I
always
will reach
realize
out to
it.
Eric Johnson and see about getting him and you and me in the room together, and we can chat about some stuff and where that overlap happens.
Yeah.
Because you guys have some stories between yourselves as well. So I appreciate your time, and this has been Leadership Soundbites with Baljeet and Michelle. And until next time, please like, share, subscribe, and have a freaking awesome day. Thank you.